Recording in progress.
Well, that was my requested changes, and Douglas's requested changes. I move to approve the minutes. Can I get a second? Second. All right. First up the bat, Lynchburg Regional Connectivity. David, can you?
All right, so I have my presentation on my computer. If you want to see, I have this all to bring up over here.
Yes.
Your way.
Let me just get to it. Is there like a way to make it bigger?
View full screen.
I'm going to switch your slides for you, is that okay?
Okay.
Unless you want to sit here.
Oh yeah, I can either way. All right, good afternoon, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about the Lynchburg Regional Connectivity Study. This is something Lucinda kind of found online on the, I believe, the Central Virginia PDC website, and I found a very interesting document, and I'm going to go into this a little bit and kind of be what the goals were, what the strategies were, and what the end product was, and what has kind of been accomplished since this study, because this is actually a pretty old study. It dates back to 2016, so it's been around for 6 years. We're going to kind of see what's happened since this study is going into being. So prepared by VDOT and OIP in 2016, this was really a first of its kind. There really had not been any studies quite like this at this point. I think we've had a lot more studies like this or have been mimicked like this, just kind of keep in line with the vision that OIP has for regional planning and statewide planning. But at the time, this was a very unique process that kind of had a real goal to kind of coordinate with all the local economic development people, all the planners, transportation officials, what we call RTAC, which is the Lynchburg Regional Advocacy Group for Transportation. So we had a lot of different organizations, agencies, and stakeholders that were kind of involved in the creation of this plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about what connectivity means in the context of this study. Basically, it's going to be looking at the movement of people and the movement of goods and the movement of information. So those are kind of the three key items that this study looked at. Basically looking at movement of people, so that's going to be connectivity for the precondition of quality of life and economic opportunity. Goal focusing on passenger connectivity is to understand and provide the means necessary for travel across multiple modes of geographic scales. Secondly, looking at the movement of goods. So freight connectivity, a very important component of this, really had not been looked at a regional level until the study came around. So that was a very important thing that was looked at. And finally, looking at broadband in the area, looking at where there are gaps, kind of especially in the rural areas and then in the urban areas where maybe that could be expanded out a little bit, where there's some regional needs. So the goal of this whole thing was to strengthen the regional economy and to assess the current role of that connectivity in supporting the economy and identify opportunities for connectivity improvement. Phase one of this was basically a baseline assessment. So looking at your current conditions of the area, assessment of your transportation infrastructure, and also an interview with the stakeholders, answering questions on transportation, workforce development, information infrastructure, and connectivity issues in the area. And part 2 or phase 2 was strategies for improvement, outline strategies that kind of address the labor market access, interregional connectivity, and connectivity between Lynchburg and markets elsewhere. So this really represents a new statewide focus on linkages between regional economies and transportation, which really fed into VTrans. And you'll see there are a lot of linkages between this and VTrans. This kind of came out in an earlier iteration of VTrans. There was a lot of improvements that were made at VTrans as a result of this study as well, and refinement to some of the items in VTrans. And then developed at the same time as the SEDS was developed for the regions. So there was a lot of information sharing going on, and they kind of benefited from each other being developed at the same time. So next up, basically we had several different project elements. I'm not really going to go into these in a whole lot of detail, but I'll say that we had interviews with various stakeholders in government, business community, and transportation sector. Got to go over each one of these project elements. The interviews really focused on operational and connectivity conditions, and then targeting the emerging issues in the area. Interviews really illuminated the non-transportation connectivity in the area, such as communications, infrastructure, and social and institutional connections that are really not apparent in qualitative or quantitative data. So got some really good qualitative information out of this as well. So what are some of the data sources that we use for the quantitative analysis? Basically, we use US Census, US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then all kinds of private sources such as Brookings Institute and US Bureau of Economic Analysis. Transportation data came from VDOT, US DOT, train search, freight flow data, and then as well as from the MPO and PDC as well. Then we looked at some academic journals as well to get a lot of the data, and then we did a pure region comparison. So basically selected 3 MSAs of similar size that were kind of university cities as well, or like, you know, had a large or a similar demographic in terms of like age and kind of like demographic cohorts. So we looked at College Station, Texas, Merced, California, and Wilmington, North Carolina. And populations were compared by cost of doing business, connectivity, market access, human capital, and quality of life. So here's just some of the outreach, all the different agencies that were involved in this, transit, airports, VDOT, even, you know, the Visitors Bureau and Convention and all that. The Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance was heavily involved in this, as was the Central Virginia PDC, which was then known as Region 2000. So strategies and actions fell into 3 themes. Basically, we had labor market and intra-regional connectivity, inter-regional connectivity, and digital connectivity. So strategies and actions were kind of developed by examining peer regions and strategies that have been successful elsewhere in the US and what might be able to be replicated in the area. They also build wherever possible on existing efforts in the Lynchburg region. Each class of strategies is evaluated from an economic perspective. This evaluation paints a picture of what is at stake for the region in economic terms. So for the labor market and inter-regional connectivity, addresses the quality of the internal travel kind of like connections and connectivity within the Lynchburg area, and its ability to attract quality labor and employers seeking that talent. So interregional connectivity, looking at strategies that are presented for the following areas, such as intercity rail, looking at intercity bus, airport developments, key highways and access on those highways, as well between urbanized areas and rural areas, and Many of these strategies will depend on partnerships as well. So basically, it's important to build partnerships between agencies so that everybody is communicating with each other and responding effectively to changes. And then also digital connectivity. So there was a pretty clear strategy here, and that was to set a minimum target speed of 25 Mbps download, and then 30 for Mbps upload for broadband coverage throughout the region, as recommended by Federal Communications Commission. So yeah, there were several actions that were kind of taken for each one of these three strategies: placemaking, local bottlenecks, transit demand management, intercity passenger rail, and so on. So we're going to be going through each one of these in a little bit more detail. So looking at labor market and intra-regional connectivity, there were three strategies, including placemaking, local bottlenecks, and transit. So really some of the issues that kind of came out as a result of this analysis of the area is that relative to the other three regions, Lynchburg is characterized by a limited labor market size, such as measured by the total population accessible within a 40-minute drive of the urban core. But it was found that it's because the population is largely dispersed within the MSA. So overall, there's about 80,000 in the city and about 260,000 in the metro, about 124,000 in the urban area. So only about half of the metro is urban, and then only about a third of the metro is the city. So a lot of the population is kind of dispersed along the key corridors 460 and 29 and 501. And then basically skills gap, particularly in the trades and STEM area. So this was also a negative for the area. This was related to labor market size, the quality of local labor force. So this was kind of measured by the percentage of people with higher degrees and in certain specialized fields. And it was found that Lynchburg was kind of the lower end of the four different areas, including the three peer areas. So 32% had a higher degree, as in an associate's or higher. So basically that was kind of like, I think there was one that was just beneath that. It was Merced, California, if I'm not mistaken. And then anticipated retirements and struggles to recruit young professionals. So when this study was done, they looked at older data. It was looking at 1998 to 2013 data as a part of this. So things may have changed a bit since then, but it was found that over that 5-year period, that the number of people between 18 and 34 shrank by about 0.9%. Cooperatively short and uncongested commutes. So that's one area where we kind of excel at. For me, I ride an e-bike to work, and it takes me 16 minutes. For most people, the average commute is 22.9 minutes, which is less than the national commute of about 26 minutes. So really not a whole lot of congestion issues, except for like peak hours on a couple of different facilities like Hamler's Mountain Road and Wards Road, and traffic affiliated with the universities as well. So downtown Lynchburg is an emerging but still limited regional urban core. I live downtown. There's been a lot of growth down there. It's been about 1,000 units built over the past 10 years through adaptive reuse mainly. A big part of that was they eliminated parking minimums in 2014, so that kind of allowed for a whole lot of construction and redevelopment of older buildings without having to add new parking. So there's been a lot of growth, but still a lot of challenges down there to really create a vibrant and engaging downtown. It's still a relatively remote downtown. It's not really at the center of the city. It's on the edge, the northern edge of the city. So there's still kind of this perception that it's a little bit further away than say Charlottesville, where it's right at the center and easily accessible from all corners of the city. So limitations to transit accessibility service. So really at present, only about 1.4% of people in the greater metro use transit to get around. It's predominantly within the city of Lynchburg. There's one line that goes up to Madison Heights, but it's very limited currently. So there's a lot of progress that needs to be there, and that was kind of cited by Lynchburg leaders as an area of improvement. Stronger higher education presence. So there are six institutions of higher learning, 5 of which are in the city, 1 is in Amherst. That kind of constitute about 1/3 of the population are students. So that's kind of an area. And then we're seeing a lot of growth. So pretty much all of the colleges have grown over the past 10 to 15 years. So that's an area of growth that we're seeing, and there's opportunity there to kind of bolster the region if we could kind of retain a lot of that talent instead of them leaving. So those interviewed believe the region provides great value, given the quality of schools and healthcare and the lower cost of congestion, or the lower cost of living and low levels of congestion, as well as the natural environment. So access to the James River and Appalachian Trail and all the natural amenities in the area is kind of seen as a big plus. All right, so placemaking, this has become a very important thing. I serve on the placemaking committee, which is a part of the Downtown Lynchburg Association, and that's really become a huge focus of the Downtown Association. We've done numerous projects such as the art alley and some parklets and in the downtown. So that is kind of like built up the perception of a pleasing place where people want to meet. And it's kind of helped attract people to downtown Lynchburg, which was the fastest growing downtown statewide from 2010 to 2020, growing by about 125%. So that is kind of like a huge thing for people, young people especially, want to live in these walkable, nice areas that have a lot of amenities and kind of provide services without having to drive too far. So as a part of this, basically continue efforts to build an urban environment that's livable and appeals to younger workers, focus on developing a community that is connected by quality of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, work to strengthen downtown Lynchburg as an asset for the entire region, and invest in the arts, education, and additionally support placemaking enhancements to other local activity centers throughout the region. We have a pretty significant streetscaping and placemaking project going in Appomattox that was funded through Scarsdale. So they're getting ready for construction on that. It's going to have Sheridan's Bath, down Old Courthouse Road. So there's no connect kind of like the various activity centers and the Civil War Museum there. So it'll kind of hopefully bolster the walkability and attractiveness for people to visit and live there. Additionally, support placemaking enhancements, pursue implementation of complete streets, better streets. So the city of Lynchburg has adopted a better streets policy. And then on top of that, the Central Virginia TPO has also adopted placemaking as a weighted measure within their LRTP as well. So the Region 2000 bicycle plan defines a set of improvements for priority corridors that kind of serve as major destinations already in use throughout the region. We've done a lot of share the road and bikes on road signage throughout the region, but a lot of work needs to be done to kind of improve those corridors for bicyclists as well, such as restriping and paving of shoulders. We did a road diet in the town of Amherst that went from a 3-lane facility to a 2-lane facility, taking out the 2-way left turn lane and placing a 6-foot bike lane on either side, resulted in a 50% reduction in crashes for automobile crashes. So that was a huge benefit. But we've started to see breweries and even like a little whiskey bar go in over there. So there's kind of like new stuff happening in Amherst. I'm not saying the bike lanes had anything to do with it, but I'd like to believe it helps accelerate a lot of that economic development. So yeah, basically wayfinding is another important thing. The TPO has their own wayfinding plan to kind of, you know, and as does the Downtown Lynchburg Association. So there have been a whole lot of improvements to kind of consolidate and you know, bring together wayfinding across the board and improve it. So the idea of complete streets and developed streets that are welcoming, safe, and functional for all types of users has been very important and a growing need for the region. All right, learning from peer regions. So cities with strong physical and perceived connections between their urban core and college campuses often provide key elements of quality of space. places, including walkability, sidewalk amenities, etc. But there is in Lynchburg a physical and psychological distance between the colleges and its downtown, which limits the city's ability to generate pedestrian and business activities. So these kind of show the distances in miles from all of the universities in the area. These top ones are in the city, and then this one is in Amherst. Compared to some of the peer cities, we're seeing that some of them are shorter distances, especially Texas A&M is basically right in downtown. So really, we're going to be looking on how we can improve connections between the downtown and commercial corridors to the universities without the need to have to drive to a lot of these destinations. So for students, that's going to be hugely important. In physical term, this plan kind of calls for a transit spine that will help spur development of research and development space within walking distance to the university, connecting to the urban core, and then additionally subsidizing bus routes so that students pay a small amount or nothing to kind of get around by transit to downtown. So potential economic gains of placemaking. So these have real economic implications for regional competitiveness. Research often shows that vibrant urban areas help attract and retain well-educated workers who help raise the region's overall educational attainment, which is a strong predictor for future employment growth. Walkability and transit accessibility can increase the property values in an area and increase foot traffic and street level business. So yeah, basically with this, I know there have been a lot of improvement. I actually have a placemaking presentation I can send you guys that kind of show through the literature some of these major economic benefits. And as I mentioned, the Central Virginia TPO has adopted this into their economic development scoring projects. So it's becoming a pretty big focus for the city and region. All right, so looking at local bottlenecks. Focus on enhancing the outstanding reliability of the network in the region, invest strategically to preserve performance on the region's road network, and to continue to support quality intra-regional travel. So this one here basically has a list of projects that were identified in 2016. I'm just going to run through them really quick. This one was already funded at the time of the plan. This one has since been funded. The Candler's Mountain Road interchange has been funded basically right at the expressway. So that is coming with the new Sherman's path for pedestrians connecting over to Liberty University. The South Amherst Highway, we have currently four applications in for South Amherst Highway. So, and they're looking pretty good. Hopefully, they're addressing a whole lot of needs through that area in terms of congestion, operations, safety, pedestrian movements, and all of that. So looking at the preliminary scores during validation, they were all scoring very well. So I think those stand a good chance of getting funded as well. And then we have a couple of other projects, and these have also been submitted. The 221 has been funded. This is basically the split pairs of 501 and 221. And then the Candler's Mountain Road improvements, we have applications from Campbell County and the city of Lynchburg this round. So all of our local governments have been very good about sticking to this plan for their connectivity needs for actual bottlenecks within the region and not really deviating from these priorities. All right, so potential economic gains. Basically, we are looking at short-term impacts associated with infrastructure investment. These are some of the cumulative benefits under all of these impacts. And I know Sandy had brought up looking at possible, what are some of the benefits of these improvements that we're doing in terms of added value for business sales and tax revenue. So yeah, there is a lot of impacts that kind of come across from these operational improvements as well. All right, so transit and transportation demand management. Building is supporting demand for transit alternatives by encouraging collaboration, communication, problem solving between major employers, regional commuters, and transit operators. continue to implement or consider implementation of activity-based commuter rewards programs. So we have Ride Solutions, and that is kind of operated by Central Virginia PDC. And so they do a good job with a lot of commuter-based rewards programs. Every year they have like Bike to Work Month, and you can get build up rewards as you report your miles that you've done. And so we have a lot of incentives that are now coming into play that kind of came as a result of this study. Work with GLTC for identifying major regional employers and educational institutions and examine the feasibility of the United Transit Pass program. So we have a new director at GLTC who's really focused on, kind of building this effort as well as microtransit in the region and kind of identifying where employers are and how we can get workers to the employers without everybody having to go to the transfer station and transfer from there. So kind of looking at these regional employment centers and how we can kind of create new transit lines from those centers. It's been kind of a big focus of the TDM as well as the current director in there. So as well as creating basically fare programs that you can do through your phone. Currently you have to pay cash, but I think that's going to be changing here very soon. Promote statewide rural van-pooling efforts. This was the focus of the Central Virginia PDC up until recently, but they've been short-staffed over there, so they'll probably pick this up once they hire their current open position for the Transportation Planning Program Director. So that's out there. If anybody is interested or knows somebody who's interested, I think they're looking, and it's open and available. So here are just some of the peer efforts and peer experience from around the state and the region. DRPT has a lot of great stuff going on right now. The Lynchburg Downtown Circulator, unfortunately, does a trial run, so it's no longer in operation. But at the time it was. So here's just some of the regional stuff going on. All right, so potential economic gains. The 2014 survey conducted found for the Rockefeller Foundation found that 80% of millennials say it's important to have a wider range of options, even if they've only been used those options. It's kind of like for them, it's important that they're at least there. And if they so choose to, it's available. So for transit and biking and walking, so just even have those around is important for a perception of a great place to live. Transit can also play a role in facilitating efficient spatial clustering of the type of preferred knowledge economy industries that a place is looking for, as well as startups. Transit provides access to labor for major industries within the Lynchburg regional economy. 40% of current transit commuters in the region work in education, healthcare, and social assistance. So now we're getting into inter-regional connectivity and broadband connectivity. Inter-regional connectivity strategies are presented in intercity passenger rail, air service, access to key highways, and cargo-oriented development. Many of these strategies will depend on partnerships between different public sector organizations in Lynchburg and the surrounding region, and between the region and private sector, or between the region and other state level efforts. So some of the things that are identified here is Amtrak service, particularly to DC. So as you guys are aware, the Amtrak there's now a new line that kind of goes from DC in the morning down south. I've taken it to Roanoke a few times already, just 2 per day trips and 1 per conference. And it's been a great asset just to be able to do that day trip down there. And then we have the additional service that came from the Roanoke extension. And now we're going to be extending it down the New River Valley. Hopefully that'll start soon. So we have a lot of, great growth in that area. In Virginia for the past 6 months has been setting record ridership on Amtrak. So we're definitely seeing the benefit of these investments here. And then air service connectivity is to maintain the current service at the Lynchburg Regional Airport, and then enhance service and efforts to expand capacity and service reliability, and expand commercial services through new airports. Currently, all flights go to Charlotte. So they've been looking for many years to expand to places such as Dulles or Philadelphia to give basically people more options for traveling. So lack of an interstate, this is kind of a big one. There's often, this is a perception issue. It's either real or perceived. I would say more often it's a perceived issue, but for a lot of companies, it's kind of almost a checkbox for them that they have to have interstate access. This is something we're not only seeing in Lynchburg, but also in Danville with the Berry Hill mega site, with companies choosing to go elsewhere because infrastructure cannot accommodate a lot of the traffic that's going to be generated from these employers moving in, even though it should. There's often a perception that it won't because it's not a designated interstate. So that's been a thing we've been fighting as well, and kind of enhancing the existing corridors that we have through there, including US 29, 460, and 501. So VDOT has been focusing on those roadways and improving operations, reliability, for commuters and for cross-regional travel through those areas. So yeah, according to stakeholders, that perception of remoteness in the minds of those outside the region has really been a big issue. Lynchburg's lack of an interstate can be perceived as a hindrance and what makes the region feel remote. But then we have convergence of freight rail lines with no major constraints or bottlenecks there. Lynchburg lies at the crossroads of two major rail lines, including Norfolk Southern and CSX. Intermodal traffic does pass through Lynchburg, but actually most of the cargo originates from Lynchburg, destined for areas outside of Lynchburg. So they kind of looked at a modal split, and it looked like most of the freight traffic is actually coming out of Lynchburg for other markets. So we do produce a lot of bulk commodities that are kind of sent to surrounding areas, mainly the Norfolk, it looks like. So limited broadband in rural areas, according to the 25 megabytes per second download speed benchmark established by the Federal Communications Commission. Urban areas within the Lynchburg have relatively high speeds, while rural areas in Bedford, Amherst, Appomattox, and Campbell have lower, no reported broadband coverage. So the quality of broadband connectivity contributes to increased productivity and competitiveness. So kind of getting better broadband coverage in rural areas has been a big focus in the area since this plan was developed. And when the plan was developed, the area was already engaged in regional discussions focused on rural broadband initiatives and limitations. Less attention has been given to the value of existing fiber optic assets in the region, even though the Lynchburg region has some of the highest speeds in the urban core in the state. Good. So intercity passenger rail, enhancing the Lynchburg's role as a major rail hub in the area, and to continue to build off the demonstrated success of Amtrak. I believe that the Amtrak line between Roanoke and DC is one of the 3 in the country that turn profit from ticket revenue. So that's been important from a statewide perspective as well as the regional perspective, kind of continue the development of that service. Regional stakeholders often view Amtrak to Lynchburg as a success story, without a doubt. And rail marketing and planning. Existing efforts in the region include the advertisements placed on the city of Lynchburg in magazines. So there's been a lot of marketing on the website as well. But really increasing speeds has been kind of like a big focus. A lot of people complain about the low speeds of 50 to 55 miles per hour. So focusing on kind of improving those speeds has been a big thing. And then also train service in North Carolina. Currently the Crescent goes to Charlotte. It's pretty bad hours. I've taken it a few times. So that's kind of another thing. There have been case studies also where Maine, for example, has done a pretty cool use the Train to Maine package for customers from Boston to kind of come down and visit the area based on the local amenities there. All right, economic gains, economic logic for focusing on rail access. First, rail is valuable to regional tourism, particularly to the northern Virginia and Northeast corridor markets. for students who don't have cars as well. That's important. Secondly, Amtrak services already offer convenient, reliable connections to business travelers, and this access could be further enhanced to enable reliable one-day return travel and increase Lynchburg's economic integration with other major East Coast economies. I know tomorrow we have a TPRAC, Transportation Research Council meeting at UVA. I'll be taking the train up to that. So I'm glad to have there's available service for just be able to pop up for a day for a meeting. It's been really, really awesome. So consolidate, this is basically looking at air surface development. The strategy mirrors the approach set forth for Lynchburg Regional Airport's air service development strategy plan. Because airlines respond to demonstrated local demand, an important first step is always bolstering the markets. The airport itself is engaged with the Check Lynchburg First campaign and its website, and only Lynchburg Regional Airport brings you directly from Region 2000, a 2,000 square mile district in Northern Virginia. So basically they have quite a few marketing strategies out there to kind of serve to appeal the region to travel to. So current efforts in the governor's budget, hand-in-hand conversation about service expansion comes with the conversion about startup incentives. So advocates for service of dollars, 50 million over 2 years approved the state budgets. Startup incentives is a part of this as well. So here are some of the proposed incentives down for marketing in 2011 compared to the pure city of College Station, how much has been spent for that. Communicating with airlines, coordinating data share. So basically coordinating between the airlines and the local business leaders as well. So this has been going on, research, online learning, and intentional international students. So basically hand-in-hand conversations about service expansion comes a conversation about startup incentives. Incentives are viewed by those in the industry as necessary part of doing business. They were not enough to convince the airline to introduce the new service. All right. So potential economic gains, basically on airport activity, these are some of the jobs that are contributed to these impact sources and the impacts of visitors and total regional impact in terms of jobs. So arriving visitors support local businesses by spending on lodging, food, beverages. On average, in the Lynchburg area, about $1,166 per sale or per visitor. And then as the global trade has expanded and the globalization of supply chains has taken place, there's increasing evidence that connectivity, principally through air transport network, and the advantage it provides for business is a significant asset that enhances productivity and improves the performance of the economy. All right, so access on key highway corridors. Focus on maintaining goods access in the interstate system is key on key corridors that connect the Lynchburg region to the national and international markets, including engagement with connectivity issues outside the Lynchburg region that affect the region's interstate access. Invest in key interregional corridors to protect and improve. So we have our arterial management plans and our reliability plans and on the arterial networks, so those are important as well to improve access to external markets and the interstate system, and incorporates important intermodal port facilities. Work with partners and the surrounding regions to advance improvements that affect Lynchburg's connectivity to outside markets. The Commonwealth's Protect Virginia's arterial investment programs was established to support economic development by promoting the efficient movement of people and goods. Looking at some of these projects, I'm going to run through the 501-221 split pair project has been funded. Words Road Access Management, 2 of 3 phases of that have been funded. The third phase is currently being applied for in smart scale. And the Lynchburg Expressway to Candler's Mountain Road improves the interchange, so this one has been funded as well. And then US 501, we've been doing improvements along this corridor. Specifically at Lakeside, we just got done doing a dual lane roundabout over there. So we've been definitely focusing on all of these recommended interregional roadway improvements. All right, so potential economic gains, construction impacts are short-term. Impacts are associated with spending on materials and labor in the course of project work construction. Operational impacts are associated with reductions in vehicle operating costs, reduced travel time, and decreased congestion. Labor market impacts, including, are associated with improved business productivity due to the ability to access a wider pool of their qualified workers. Cargo-oriented development, enhanced local readiness to respond to freight rail-oriented development opportunities, and Lynchburg is served by 2 Class 1 railroads throughout the region. This is kind of a map of where those railroads are that crisscross throughout the region, and maintain ongoing lines of communication between Class 1 railroads and region throughout the Commonwealth Transportation Board Rail Subcommittee. And build awareness of the Virginia Rail Industrial Access Program as well. So some of the best practices that we're seeing from this is focus on industrial development efforts on sites that are kind of already agglomerated, the reg of the rail lines that pass through the region. So there are 2 factors that make incremental rail-oriented development easier than development on greenfield sites. First, it is easier from an environmental review and community perspective to expand industrial centers where they already exist. And second, this approach recognizes the underlying market economics that railroads are concerned with. So potential economic gains, realization of economic gains from cargo-oriented development will depend on interest from the private sector. In addition, there are economic benefits that research shows are generated from spatial clustering in the area, especially with regards to freight and logistical activities. Clustering tends to support productivity gains from knowledge spillovers and through the development of specialized labor pool. And finally, the clustering of rail-oriented businesses can create advantages by enticing better service from railroads and more concentrated demand. Broadband, so pursue a minimum speed of 25 megabytes per second download speed. So this has kind of been the core focus of this, and then also to capitalize on the existing fiber optic assets as well. Lynchburg is served by existing fiber optics, by an existing fiber optic network that can be further marketed as an economic development asset. So this is something I've definitely brought up before with Smart Scale. I think would be a good thing to look at in the future for scoring is the assets of a region, including broadband and tourism and all of these different things that are kind of not as tangible as what's currently analyzed in there, but are equally important. So this is going to be something I think that'll be very important moving forward. So there are several places that Lynchburg can turn to support for expanding broadband. Virginia's Office of Telework Promotion and Broadband Assistance provides information to individuals and businesses. Communities across Virginia have adopted a variety of approaches to community-led broadband initiatives, including the Roanoke Valley has established in 2013 a broadband study and set of tasks to be accomplished as well. And then the Region 2006 process includes suggested investigation for free public wireless internet in parks, downtown, and activity centers. Broadband access integrates underserved and rural communities into wider social and economic networks and provides access to online programs and online education. It enables companies to better compete in highly connected economy. As technology advances, the importance of high-speed broadband will only increase. So here are just some of the implementation strategies and actions crucial to enhancing connectivity in the region. They've developed all these fun little one-pagers you can see in the reports later on. So a series of meetings were held to present the draft findings at the local and regional level. to begin discussing potential groups that could take ownership of the strategy area. So this was kind of broken up into different groups such as Lynchburg Transit Company, Central Virginia, PDC, and NPO, Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance. So it's kind of various groups that are working together to come up with the best plan of action and execute these strategies. As a result of these discussions, champions were kind of identified throughout that, and then there's a continued rollout of the study findings and recommendations through presentations, such as this one. Put links to the study and reports on agency websites. That's kind of how Lucinda found this. And the long-term implementation of recommendations in the study will rely heavily on continued discussions. We have RTAC, which is very prevalent in those discussions, and executing strategies from this plan. So those discussions are ongoing and will continue to really build the success of the region and build greater connectivity throughout the region as well. Key takeaways of all of this is the region's road network provides reliable connections within the region and to external markets. The airport, despite limitations in the number of connections, actually grown in ridership over the past few years and maintained its existing service. So definitely looking at expansion moving forward is going to be a big priority for them. Study recognized maximum gains that can be achieved through synergistic multimodal efforts in cross-strategy areas, working from real needs identified in this and prior VTrans 2040 efforts. This study highlights opportunities for a balanced set of strategies across multiple nodes. And also outlines a set of 23 strategies organized into 3 different themes that were kind of spoken about earlier. Another theme emerging from this study is the communication and collaboration based on shared objectives. Connectivity is inherently multi-dimensional, so it's one different layers on this, including many different actors across both the public and private sector. So really important to keep everybody connected and communicating in order to execute the strategies of this plan. Moreover, the ability to accurately and fully communicate about existing unique assets in the region, a key focus of the study depends on knowledge sharing across a broad spectrum of stakeholders. So making sure people are sharing information and keeping each other apprised. And yeah, that's all I've got.
Thank you, that's really interesting.
Yeah, any questions?
Didn't you say funded this study? Who funded this study?
It was funded through WIPE.
And what was the program?
So, this, I'll have to go back and look. This was the very first, this is pretty old. It goes back to 2016. So I'm not sure if the program still exists, but there might be something through the GAP program where you can look at something like this.
It just seems so broad and I mean, it's definitely not just a transportation focused plan. It seems to me that this is heavily economic development. And I'm just curious how they,
So one of,
yeah, Rick, are you on?
yeah, so I was the project manager for the study, and part of the premise behind it was to show the economic viability of transportation projects and tying it back to the region to support its growth. A lot of the things that occurred out of this was partnerships between Liberty University, the airport, multiple different CVCC creating CDL training programs, to meet a lot of the points that were brought out as part of the study. So this particular study, one of the things that Office of Intermodal Planning is looking, and one of their goals back then was to do these more centralized studies to support VTrans. So to really put a focus in on a local jurisdiction in order to give it its, kind of its own flavor within the VTrans product. So some of the outcomes will be very specific to the region and can still be supported by VTrans with that. And then, the hopes of it is that, like David was saying, it's a living document. So even though the study was done back in 2016, it continues to flourish because people have taken ownership and are champions of each one of the components So when we have our quarterly LRTAG updates, each one of the champions gives an update to what process they're moving forward in the study. And the fact that we have this helps support some of the projects through multiple funding streams, again, through the support of VTrans and the fact that we have this separate study out there. So I think there's more opportunities. One of the outcomes of this is this provides a template for future efforts. I know Roanoke has shown some interest in looking at it, and some other areas looking at piggybacking off of this and using, similar concept in order to build their own plan.
If you have more interest in maybe replicating or doing something like this, I would reach out to Boise Tender. Might be able to fill you in on grant opportunities, probably through the GAP program, to look into something like this.
I'll also mention that our region is just now kicking off the studs process itself. So I think Lynchburg has a really strong economic development, a regional economic development program. So that might also create some opportunities for some momentum in that direction.
Yeah, the SEDS was also done for the region at the same time, so you'll see a lot of overlap between this study and the regional SEDS as well. So a lot of the goals and strategies are pretty similar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm just opening my presentation.
So we have various programs that are economic related, small scale, just there are a lot of various. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So, who here has not heard of the regional transit vision plan? Okay. I just I want to make sure that I'm not repeating myself. I know some of you have heard this several times. So I'm going to go through quickly what the vision plan is, and then talk about how the networks serve the rural areas. And I've got some slides comparing networks and current service to the rural services. So the program is a 28-month, $350,000 project supported by DRPT, the City of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and the TJPDC. And it uses data and public input to create a long-term strategy for public transit in the region. We did a lot of engagement. At the beginning, we heard from the community that they wanted more engagement than was planned. So we added in several surveys. We did mailings to targeted neighborhoods, focus groups, and we're at in-person outreach events like the Soul of Seaville, and we have 5 stakeholder workshops. What we heard was that equity, climate change, and multimodal access were top priorities for the community, which led to the guiding principles and the goals of the project being developed around equity, climate change, and multimodal access. Some of the other things that we heard through the surveys and interviews was that waiting was a major burden for waiting for buses, like for transit, was a major burden. It takes too long for people to use transit. And then there wasn't enough service hours in the day. So like if you had to go to work on Sunday, you weren't able to do it. People were taking taxis, to and from minimum wage jobs. And then also, the limited times of service in rural areas was also a barrier. So we produced a report. It's the final transit vision plan, and the draft is available, but the final product will be available at the end of this month. The vision plan has in it why the region needs transit and the benefits of transit, the vision for improved and expanded transit. So these were the goals and objectives that we developed from the community input. And then we also use data. So the access of the assessment of markets and needs for transit in the region were also analyzed and used to come up with the network of services that we came up with. So the next part of the plan and what we're going to talk about most today are the networks that the consultants and transit providers came up with. There's two different networks, the constrained and the unconstrained service network. And then the report just goes more in depth into the engagement process and the next steps for implementing the vision. So why invest in transit? There's a real need for transit in our area. About 25% of a household's income in the area is spent on transportation, and another about 25% is spent on housing. The national average, a household spends about 16% of its income on transportation. So there's a real need in our area for people to be able to get places, especially to work. And then I have another slide just for you all so you can see it's broken out into the different areas. Kind of talking about the cost of housing and the cost of transportation, and also the amount of greenhouse gases. And I was just really curious about the greenhouse gases, so I looked it up. And one ton of greenhouse gases is, if you took a telephone pole and you made a square out of it, that would be like 1 metric ton of greenhouse gases. So it's quite a bit. And transit is one of the leading producers of greenhouse gas in that area. So a good bus service will help with a lot of different problems. First of all, it's a social safety net. So there are people who can't drive and they still need to get around. So it's very helpful in that area. Economic opportunities, as discussed in the network survey, the network study, having a good transportation system and showing investment in that tells companies that this is a good place to be, that their workers will be able to get to and from jobs. And then the climate and environmental benefits, the community has been pretty loud about wanting to continue to work on reducing greenhouse gases. Transit does reduce congestion. If people are on the bus or walking or biking, then there's less cars on the road. And then it's much healthier for the community if people are walking and biking. It's also less stressful, and it's a great way to meet your neighbors and get out in your community and see it from a different perspective. And then personal liberty. At some point, we're all going to stop driving, and it would still be nice to be able to go out and visit friends and go to social events and go shopping. So we came up with a vision based on the feedback that we got, and the vision is develop, design, and provide transit in the region in a manner that reflects a collaborative, inclusive, and equitable process representing needs in both urban and rural areas. This transit system expands opportunities for all residents, that's the equity, reduces reliance on automobiles multimodality, and helps protect the environment, climate change mitigation. So the two vision networks that we have, we did a 3-day workshop with the transit providers and came up with 2 different service networks, the unconstrained and the constrained network. I think you all have seen this. So I'm gonna are there any questions about this slide? Okay, yeah, all right. So this is the existing circulator service, and the circulator service is what goes, lets people go door to door in the county, so just in that region. And you have to schedule it at least a day ahead of time. And it's mostly for people who can't drive, like older adults and people with disabilities. And so this is the current services that we have in the rural counties. As you can see, there's no service on the weekends. And Boulder, Buckingham County is part of JAUNT's service area, so that was included in the project. And there's limited days and times when the services are available as well. The constrained regional network would have services all day and for a much longer span of services. It wouldn't be every hour, but it would be pretty close. And those services would connect to fixed route services that would go into the city. So with the constrained network, you can see they would connect with the networks that go into the city. So the connect services are the fixed route that JAUNT does that go into Charlottesville. And this is the existing network. So again, there's very limited weekend hours. Some of them are 2 trips a day. So you go and you're there all day and you go back. If you miss it, you don't get to work or wherever you're going. And so the constrained connect services would be 7 days a week. They have much more trips and more frequency, so people could use it more often. So here you can see the unconstrained network shows it shows the blue lines in the rural areas are the fixed routes that go like every hour. And then there's also micro transit proposed for the urban areas and the rural areas. So all the yellowish beige areas would be a micro transit area. So the next steps are the transit governance study, communicating and organizing around a regional transit authority, long-term land use planning and coordination with transit, workforce development for bus drivers, implementing guidelines for tracking service improvements. So that would be the transit services, how they're improving, and building a consensus around the bus rapid transit corridor. Any questions? Okay.
So I know we're kind of like discussing Nelly's Sword possibly becoming a UDA. Are there any opportunities to get fixed route service there eventually, or have you guys looked into that?
Not in this study, but that's not to say like.
I don't think they really expanded the surface areas necessarily as much as they like identified where there were currently opportunities. I think the next step with the government study is really looking at what potentially could be fundable and how those funding decisions were made. So I think there's opportunity to have some further conversations of if there's additional funding, how do we allocate that? What's the best use of that?
Right.
I think, yeah.
That's good. And then
David, on that same topic, wasn't Nellinsford, didn't they have service with the noise? Didn't John want service to Nellinsford? Is this still going on?
We provide service in Nelson County, but I'm not sure if it goes all the way up to Nellinsford.
I think just like on demand service, like if you call that, it's available.
Yeah, I've looked at that. There's just the fixed route service just starts in Louisa, so there's like one right now. There used to be, I think there used to be an internal route from Greene to Fluvanna, right?
Yeah, so there's a circulator and then there's a connect service.
Yeah.
And just something to keep in mind with the expanded hours is that's right for bus drivers, just there's kind of a shortage. So my grandmother, she's 88, she lives in downtown Savannah, just got done visiting last week, and she mostly walks to get around to go to the grocery store and everything, but she's oftentimes can't get a bus because she'll call and they say we just don't have a driver at the moment. So I know that's been an issue in Lynchburg as well, and they've been cutting hours as well, just because of lack of drivers, so it's just something to think about, I guess, and it's everywhere. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Now for a roundtable, David, you want to start us off?
Sure, so we have the Route 151 study, pretty much going strong on that. I was out there a few weeks ago, did a field visit, we got photos, got some good pedestrian activity in those photos along the corridor around Millie'sport. Then we got the travel lane lifts and all the percent grades through there, so we're moving along with that, got traffic counts completed in the late spring. So we'll have an in-person public meeting and a virtual metro request survey as well through that effort. So we'll kind of fill everybody in as we move into that and moving along there. So that's kind of been our focus up this way. And smart scale applications, we're into scoring right now. So we just wrapped up the congestion scoring and we're looking at safety currently and accessibility. So it should be first week of January, we'll get a good idea of how the projects in Nelson County did with that effort, so stay tuned.
What's next?
Oh. No, so I was hoping you would.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Matt Wallace, Town Scottsville Administrator. Nice to be here. I'm not a formal member of the group. Scottsville's working on a couple of fun rural transit projects. We've got a TA sidewalk project under contract and design. We did a little tactical urbanism thing on one of our Main Street crosswalks to provide some response to public complaints about safety. 90% positive, even though we took away a couple of parking spaces. You love to see that kind of responsiveness and good feedback. We put in one of those worthy applications with GAP with appreciation to the county for helping to carry it, to look at some multimodal planning in the town and participating in the transit governance study as well. I think the small towns in the region have some interesting demand on these transit solutions and little nodes of density. I expect Greene and Louisa little towns may have that as well, so I'd be curious to compare notes with them and see what we can do together. And great to keep in touch with John about some of the services that we might do together. Fun stuff.
I didn't know you weren't officially a member here, but too small. Well, maybe now with that new approved development down there, across that threshold. That did get approved, is that right? The
It's not signed, sealed, delivered out of
planning
planning commission.
commission, okay, great. Look forward to hearing more about that. Okay, great for me. It's just going around. Spirit doing it first. Yeah, you don't. I actually don't really have much to share, but we have moved into our phase 2 of the comprehensive plan, which is going to be, is going to have a lot of impacts, I think, not just in our urbanized area, but in the rural areas as well, because we're seeing some pressure to allow some new uses into the areas that we previously had not really had any new land use allowed in. So some ideas, and I don't know exactly what's going on, some ideas about how we can have some limited development, new development occurring in the areas like Earlysville and down around Scottsville as well. So it'd be interesting to see how that moves forward. And also how we talk about rural roads and paved roads, things like that, as well as bike ped connections, recreation uses out in the rural areas. So that there'll be a lot to come with that. We'll probably want to bring some of the things that we're talking about in the comprehensive plan update to the rural tech committee and that's feedback on. Not really many projects though that are happening there right now. One thing that is interesting though is that we did get approval for a FLAP grant, a Federal Lands Access Program, and this is up at the Sugar Hollow Reservoir. so which has been an area that's not been managed as well as it could have throughout the years. It's a little rough around there in the warm weekends. And that does provide access into the national park and as well as a lot of other recreational activities out there. And so this project is to improve parking and trailhead access and some trails up in there to kind of just manage that a little bit better because of what it was before, which was a free fall essentially. and maybe prevent some of the parties that occur in the area. Not that I'm against parties. I want to make that clear. Parties are okay, it's just some of them. I think that's really it for our rural areas, and we'll look forward to working with Scottsville on that potential gap project. So we need to talk more about that. I think it's an issue in the future.
Sure, so we're, I guess we said stage 2 of comp plan, we're about stage 3, entering into stage 4, going into the new year. So some of the major things that have happened recently this fall for us as a county is our Dewberry Water and Wastewater Master Plan was approved. It's a major component of our comprehensive plan elements infrastructure-wise. And then our economic development strategic plan was approved around the same time, new water and sewer ordinances. And so what that's done in the, we expected this obviously, but the Zion Crossroads area is really starting to, in the Route 15, Southern Route 15 corridor. We have, this is our current, the seaside cases that we're working on, 120,000 square feet of industrial office flex distribution centers, that kind of area. This is just south of Starlight Park Drive. It's the outer edge, the southeastern quadrant of the Zion Crossroads area. And on the flip side, we've had strong proponent of small business, where we've had individuals looking at rezoning land on 250 as well for farm equipment sales and machinery sales, ironically in the rural county, we have none right now. So that individual will step forward, and that's right at 250 west of Zion Station in the Troy Road, the new roundabout area, just kind of northwest of there. And then another rezoning that's right down from there on the south side of 250 for more what I call business incubator, contractor storage yards, shop display room areas. So we have all these massive warehouses and that are might come online. So there was interest in more of what developer wanting to do ones for people starting out the business and coming out of their homes and coming out of smaller areas. So it's a pretty good, well-rounded amount of work that's going on with that. So that's pretty much it. We really focused on also this. You see, there's lots of green on this layout. We've gone through probably the last 6 months or more in the comprehensive plan, rural preservation and historic preservation elements of the plan, especially about maintaining buffers, landscaping, setbacks from proper setbacks from corridors, and establishment of better gateways into the county. I guess is what the community and the public's been indicating to us. So this new developer has responded accordingly with staff's guidance. Thanks.
So we have second stage of the comp plan, fourth stage, I would say next stage, Louisa County's next stage of our comprehensive plan, so a small post plan. So working on that as you try to get a little time in the office. Planning Commission, and the last time we met, reviewed design town center amendment to increase about 124 units to the previously approved plan that had 599. Planning Commission did approve that. That'll go to the Board of Supervisors probably in the month of December. On the other end, so that's on Crossroads. On the other end of the county, the Spotsylvania border, we have Lake Anna Resort, which has become very contentious. And that was also approved by the Planning Commission recently. That one won't go more until the 5th of December. So, you know, we have two potentially large traffic generators on either end of the county with their own challenges and needs. The board's going to have to make a decision on here in the next couple months. And it also has raised questions that we just had a Planning Commission workshop on transportation related items a few months ago. You know, VDOT came and gave some information. So transportation has become a real focus of the Planning Commission as of late. We'll see if the new year continues to be busy. I know a couple solar projects knocking on the door, so we're always learning from those. And there is a small project, about 100 acres. So we haven't approved a solar project since Fellowship. It's a 100-acre project, which a lot of people have probably read in the news. So we'll probably be site plan approving that by the end of the year. We'll start seeing construction of a solar project. So it'll be interesting to see all the conditions and the requirements and the things that you've heard from Douglas and I. You know, they're out there probably videoing the road now before they start construction. Project liaison, complaint line, things like that. So we'll keep you updated as we have the solar project come online or start building with the new conditions. So 2023, here we go. So I got, what you got going on, Jim?
Well, I will say, Doug showed us an illustration of a development, and he pointed out there's a lot of green space on there. We don't have any Fluvanna space on our narrow project, so I'm sorry. Apologize for that. Transportation, well, our comp plan is at DEFCON 4. We're actually ready to complete it. We're reviewing the transportation chapter now. So we hope to be ready to have the Planning Commission hand it off. We're going to have a joint session with the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission so that everybody can have some questions, some conversation back and forth between the two groups. And then we'll have in front of the Board of Supervisors. Transportation wise, our focus this year has been really mostly on applying for planning grants to try and find good pedestrian plans. Because as we expanded in Greene as a rural county, we expanded quickly. Fluvanna and Greene used to fight back and forth between who was the highest growth community in the 40% range for quite some time. And that all developed without any pedestrian networks, really virtually none. So we were trying to go backwards and start planning ways for pedestrian access. And we have two really strong needs that we're focusing on. One is really just multimodal access. We have a relatively urban area in Rockersville, in our growth area, on the highway. A lot of the houses are on the east side of the highway, a lot of the jobs are on the west side of the highway, and there's no real way to walk without being in traffic, especially when you're crossing 20. And then secondary to that would be some recreational access. We have some large shoulders, some large right away along Route 33, and a lot of our citizens use that for recreation. It's nice because it's a big wide swath of pavement. It's not there because my estimate is 70% of the drivers driving by at 55 miles an hour are probably texting, so they won't see when they get off the road and question people. And the other aspect is, I don't know, if it's not a planned bike path, and you see it in Albemarle, bicycle paths along Burkmar Extended, whenever it rains, everything that's in the driveway washes into the bike path. So it's nothing but rocks and glass and cigarette butts, and so that it is challenging sometimes to ride there. And then all great bicycle paths on most roads that have shoulders have been taken away for rumble strip safety planned by VDOT. So you can't really, I wouldn't recommend bicycling. I'm sure Benson's ridden across one of those before. It's not a pleasant experience. So that's the main things we're focused on. If we don't have any major projects, Greene, the way we're fortunate, we have two major roads that come through. It's a tiny county landmass wise. And so most of the traffic is on 29 and 33. And that's also our growth area where most of our projects are. So we don't have a lot of large rural projects that create traffic. We have a larger glamping proposal, but it's literally 700 feet from Route 33. So and it already had commercial entrance. So it really wasn't a bad location for that. Although everyone that came to the meeting did describe it as the world's worst location. It's a great project, great idea, but it should be in the industrial area. Yeah, because that's where people want you. What's that? Yeah. So that's all I have.
Sure. So John is currently wrapping up our TDP. It should be done in December. We're working with Kate and Church to do that. And we're also wrapping up our alternative fuels feasibility study that we're doing with Human Word, and just working on that.
Great. Who wants to start on the computer for us?
I can go. So we also submitted a gap grant request. Sandy pretty much did all of the legwork on that. So thank you, Sandy. I pretty much just hit submit. That was for a small area plan for Nelly's Ford. We're hoping to designate, rural growth area up there for some funding opportunities, maybe for bike and pedestrian lanes, and also incorporate it into our comprehensive plan update. We did have our first joint session on that. They gave us some of the demographics. We're gonna have joint sessions every other month. And I believe the board decided they want additional sessions, just staff led, on specific topics like transportation and housing, and other topics. So I'll probably be reaching out to some of you for input. We also got direction from our board to have the planning commission consider a reworking of our cluster ordinance. It's not very user friendly right now, and I'm not sure it's ever been used, honestly. So the gentleman who's requesting that we look at this has indicated that he most recently worked with Fluvanna on updating their ordinance. So Doug, I'll probably try to catch up with you at some point in the next couple weeks too, just to get your thoughts and your experience with that. And that's pretty much all I have.
Hey, Dylan.
Yeah.
Just so we're not replicating a lot of the same work, so we're going to be looking at pedestrian improvements and traffic calming through Nelly's Ford as a part of my 51 study. So we can, coordinate together on those two study efforts, so we have the same recommendations or similar recommendations coming out of both of those for street improvements.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we talked to Rick a little bit about it too. So yeah, I definitely want to make sure we're all on the same page, moving in the same direction, and hopefully we get it. So yeah, definitely looking forward to hopefully working with the tender and you guys all together.
Yeah, this is Chuck. I'll go. I have just a couple of things to add to Michael's comments. I'm working on developing comments for Louisa County on Zion's Crossroads. So hopefully I'll get those to you today, Tom, and Chris, so I'll let Christian and Chris know. We're still flushing out smart scale scoring. So that's hopefully we'll be wrapping that up in the next week. And we'll be finished that. We're also looking at starting to consider what we want to do for round 6 of smart scale and how we're going to go about some of that process. to try to streamline some of the criteria and reduce the number of applications, so we're not wasting a lot of resources and time on applications that we're not going to be able to fund. So more to come on that.
Good. Anybody else want to participate?
Just one other quick comment to mention from Fluvanna. It was a business avenues. Some of you all may have worked with their Equetta G. Murray Key, who served on the Regional Housing Partnership here at TJPDC. And our planning commissioner from the Lake at Fluvanna District passed away on the day of our actual planning commission meeting on October 11th from leukemia. Rather young. She was 46. Extremely vibrant, worked on a lot of projects, was indirectly the main person I worked with when I got here and came down here for my first time at Water Center. When we started the Regional Housing Partnership. I just want to let you all know, the Planning Commission and board are working on appointing our person who would be seated on the PC actually next Wednesday night. So we'll have a new Planning Commission probably December or January. Start of the year, but kind of end this on a sad note, but I just want to let you know that what I'm communicating to you all here is let Christine know that we'll probably be, the board will be sending the person who would be sitting on some of the selections that I think she was finishing off as part of her tasks.
Has the regional housing partnership already been notified?
I'm sure that they have, Caitlin's Louisa, our board clerk.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but it's been kind of rough for us because we're finishing our plan and, we're honestly getting ready to do a lot of stuff with our on some of those aspects, but just want to pass that along. But always remember that the work, and I'll say the 3.5 years that I've been here, I've never seen a person be more community planning orientated as a person as she was. So, thanks.
Sorry for the loss.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add before we adjourn?
I'll just quickly say that my role is slightly changing here, so I think I'm probably not going to be attending this meeting regularly, but we have Eric, who will be the regular participant in this meeting.
And I'll do the same. I actually, John Michael Whalen views online. As our planning staff finishes the comp plan, I'm going to be starting to send John Michael in the next one, the January regional quarterly meetings that will be coming in my stead and providing real good information. So he's already built a good relationship with Michael and Chuck at VDOT, and I think all of you all met him. So, thanks.
Also just mentioned that as we're talking about that in crossroads, we have wrapped up the project. We received 120 comments on the draft transportation system recommendation. So there's a lot of opinions on that project. So, yeah, it was fun to work on something that was of interest to the community.
Is that an in-person meeting or a survey?
That was, so we did a couple of in-person, we did some virtual meetings and then other requests from the public. We did some in-person, just informational meetings. And then this was basically just posting a draft of the final recommendations on the website and giving people a 30-day comment period. And I think we got more comments than we got in survey responses, just, from that open-ended. They're pretty consistent too.
Thanks, Sam.
No problem.
My motion to adjourn. Second. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in the new year, I guess.
Thank you.
It is, I think you had.
Great. After I got it.